Now, there is yet more evidence that South Africa is losing the battle against crime and deeply entrenched criminal networks. The 2023 Global Organised Crime Index released earlier this week showed that South Africa scored 7.12 on a scale of criminality out of 10. That means we're almost getting a distinction in crime. To put this into global context, we are now the 7th highest in the world and the 3rd worst in Africa when it comes to organised crime. According to the report, South Africa's organised crime networks are fueled by corrupt relationships and often have been entrenched in the criminal economy in the country. This has led to a crisis of trust in government and law enforcement. We're now joined by Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime researcher Jenni Irish-Quobosheane. Jenni, thank you for being with us. So this isn't because the state and the police are incompetent always. What this suggests is that there's corruption at every level fueling the organised crime. Are you able to give us a sense of how bad the situation is?
Can't really hear you at all. Sorry, I'm not able to hear what the
question. All right, let me try again, Ms. Irish-Quobosheane. I was saying it sounds like corrupt relationships. Well, according to the report, corruption fuels organised crime, links it, gets it more deeply entrenched into society and the economy. How bad is it?
So I think that if you look at the global index, corruption is one aspect, and particularly when it comes to factors of resilience, and organised crime obviously rely on corruption. But when we looked at the index, we looked at 15 different types of organised criminal markets and 15 types of criminal actors and their influence and impact. And that is what I think really ranked South Africa up the scale when it comes to the criminality score. I think of concern for us, though, is that while the criminality score went up compared to our 2021 survey, our resilience factors, which are the factors that help us combat organised crime, went down. So we're seeing a quite concerning pattern where our criminality score is going up, but our resilience to deal with organised crime score is going down.
So let's start with the one side of the equation. Why is organised crime and criminality going up? Why is South Africa becoming a haven of sorts, it sounds, for organised crime networks from across the world?
So I think that what we're seeing is two types of networks kind of operating here. We're seeing the one type of network, which is local, where local organised criminal gangs are actually on the increase. And we're seeing that if you look at cases of extortion, etc. But then we're also seeing that South Africa is becoming a more attractive haven for foreign criminal actors and for transnational syndicates. And we're seeing that when one looks, for example, at the kidnapping statistics and the number of foreign actors there are involved in some of the high-profile kidnapping syndicates in the country. So it's a combination of local actors and foreign actors. And obviously the fact that our resilience has gone down means that it is actually becoming more attractive to operate in South Africa.
And why is resilience dropping? I mean, every year we have a new cohort of police officers. We have people who should be dedicated to their jobs, and some of them are. But why, in general, are we losing this battle?
So I think when it comes to resilience, we looked at 12 different types. We look at 12 different things that contribute to resilience. And in some areas, our resilience still remains relatively high, so an independent judiciary, a media. But I think in some areas we have seen a decline in our resilience. Policing is definitely one of those factors. Legislation, we've got the legislation in place, but when it comes to implementation of the legislation, we're still quite weak in terms of implementation of that legislation. So I think there's some areas of resilience where we remain relatively strong, but there's certain other areas like policing and implementation of policy and legislation in particular where we are still very weak.
Given what has happened over recent years, should the police minister still be in office?
I think we wouldn't I wouldn't necessarily want to comment on specific individuals, but I think we do need to look at our policing structure as a whole. We need to look at issues of corruption. We need to look at how is organised crime itself being dealt with within the police, how are investigations being managed, are we effectively implementing the Protection of Organised Crime Act, Prevention of Organised Crime Act. We need to look at crime intelligence. I think there's a whole myriad of things that we need to look at when it comes to our policing, and not just individuals and the positions that they hold.
Sure, and picking up on something you said earlier, which of course is just one part of the puzzle, but we do have global operators in these networks. We need to be very careful in a country where we offer refugees, rightly so, important refuge here, and we have seen xenophobia. But if we look at the borders and control borders better, would that help the situation, or are the global players that you talk about already here and entrenched?
I think we have a number of global players that are already here and entrenched. However, when one looks at the goods and how goods move, the borders are key factors. And it's not just our land borders, not just our border with Mozambique, Namibia, Zimbabwe, etc., but it's also our ports. So if one looks at certain types of commodities, they move extensively through our borders, and particularly our ports and our airports, etc. So when we look at border controls, we're not just looking at land borders, but we're looking at all our borders and ports of entry.
All right, thank you for your time. That was researcher Jenni Irish-Quobosheane from the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime, looking at this alarming report, giving us above 7 on a scale of criminality involving networks out of a score of 10.